I read 10 books in March, and 6 of them were The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. Hi, I'm Kynwyn, also known as Feed the Writer, and I did not film any reviews or reflections as I went this month. Partly because I was away, partly because I got sick immediately upon returning from being away. But this has been something of a mistake because thanks to generally a poor memory and a whopper of a sinus infection, I cannot remember the first fucking thing about most of the books I read. But I have a gin and a spare hour, so let's see what I can drum up for you. But like, this is definitely going to be a shorter video than usual because I'm not over-egging how little I recall. Rather than going through things in order of what I read, let's divide it into non-Murderbot and Murderbot, starting with the non-Murderbot. I kicked off the month with 2 DNFs, which I will expand on a little bit later if I have time, but the first successful read of the month I had was The Wilderness That Bears Your Name by James E. Pearson. Yep. Which is a poetry collection. As the title might imply, these poems are all very nature-based. It was put on my radar by an Instagram account called Poetic Puppets, which takes pictures of the Muppets and Sesame Street puppets and sort of transposes a line of modern poetry over them. It is actually amazing, and it is responsible for putting so many new poets on my radar. This is the post in question. It's taken from Pearson's poem This Spring. That poem is in this collection. It is absolutely beautiful. I'm not going to read it for you because I'm really bad at reading poetry, but I'll put it on the screen for you to peruse in your own internal voice. It remained my favorite poem as I read through the collection, but I really loved a lot of them. The collection is organized around the 4 standard European seasons plus a 5th mud season, which is kind of regionally specific to, I guess, places with snow. I cannot relate. I have never seen snow in a place where I have lived. But yeah, it's a really gorgeous collection. I'm very new to poetry, so I actually do not know how to speak about it, but I liked every poem in this collection and I loved a couple of them. So I think that's like a really solid collected work of poetry. I read The Antlered King by Marianne Gordon, which is the conclusion to the Raven's Trade duology, which begins with The Gilded Crown. If you've been watching along with me since the beginning of this channel, you will know that I really loved The Gilded Crown, and I really enjoyed The Antlered King. I possibly also loved The Antlered King, but I am struggling to remember a huge amount of detail about The Antlered King, which is not a way of me saying that it is a forgettable book. There are parts I remember very clearly, and I know that I bawled my eyes out at the end of this book. Like, I need you to remember that I have been out of my head this month. Luckily, this is a direct sequel and is honestly more of a volume 2. I believe Marianne Gordon wrote The Gilded Crown and The Antlered King as one complete book before being convinced by her publishers to split it into 2. So anything I tell you would have been a spoiler anyway, but I am planning on rereading both of them together, so hopefully whenever that happens, I will be able to give you a more thorough report. But I will say that what I have been left with is a feeling of deep but bittersweet satisfaction. I've been worried this past year or so that I've been in an extended breakup with high fantasy, but The Raven's Trade reminded me of all of the things that I love about high fantasy. It just gave me like a really nice level of politics and magic and sort of historical influence alongside a really juicy personal story. So I think what has happened is that I am kind of breaking up with epic fantasy, and I'm not quite finding a home in this new wave of what we're calling cozy fantasy, but personal stakes fantasy that sits sort of in the middle there is really my sweet spot. And we're just not even going to talk about romantasy. It's not for me. If you would like some actual detail about what these books are about, please go and check out my best of 2024 video in which The Gilded Crown does feature. You could also check out my December 2024 video, but that really features a side rant about how much I hate the covers and also how confused I am by romantasy, which this is not. It's kind of like dark high fantasy with a tragic romance through line, subplot, something. Toxic lesbians. Well, toxic lesbian, singular. Now, in December of 2024, I read The Gilded Crown, and then I read Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen immediately afterwards. And by pure coincidence, this month I followed The Antlered King with Interesting Facts About Space by Emily Austen. Lesbians, when it rains, it pours. I absolutely loved Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, which was the first Emily Austen I had ever read. And I loved Interesting Facts About Space, possibly even more. Or maybe the same amount, I don't know. They're both distinct and excellent. So Interesting Facts follows Enid, who is a commitment-phobic, serial dating lesbian who is half deaf in one ear, is obsessed with true crime, works for a space program, and has a phobia of bald men, and has a very, very depressed mother. And it is for her very, very depressed mother that she tries to come up with as many interesting facts about space as she can to just kind of feed them to her mum whenever she's having a bad time. The story kicks off with Enid receiving a phone call from the wife of someone she's been hooking up with, and fairly similarly to Everyone in This Room, these titles are so long, but I love them. Much like the other one, it is a story about a very mentally ill, traumatized person realizing that they need to reach out and ask for help. But Enid is a completely different character, and the story goes about it in a completely different way. I actually really love it when authors have like a really central core theme that they just explore through different avenues. This book is funny, it is heartbreaking, it is so, so well written, and it had me bawling my eyes out on a plane. But I am also terrified of flying, so I don't know if that made me cry perhaps more than I would have otherwise, but it was a lot. The person next to me shuffled away. Emily Austen writes disability, both mental and physical, just so wonderfully. This book is really brimming with heart and humanity. I am actually so feral to read We Could Be Rats, which is her next book, which is out like everywhere else, but it's not out in Australia yet. I have many friends who've read it in their other countries, but no, not me. I have to wait until, oh, actually maybe it comes out in April. In my mind, it's a very long way away, but it's March already. It's the end of March already. It's either April or June. I hope it's April. I'm gonna check. It's in like 3 days. Spoiler alert for my April wrap-up, I guess. And the last non-Murderbot book I read this month was Emma by Jane Austen. I am trying to read all of Jane Austen's work along with a few friends this year. I have only skipped Persuasion because I read it at the end of last year. For an episode of Snark Squad Pod with Marines and Nicole. I'll drop a link below, it was very fun. Emma is one of the Austens that I have been really familiar with through the various adaptations, but I had never actually read before in full. And it was really fun because the 3 adaptations I like best are Clueless, obviously, the 2009 miniseries with Romola Gary and Johnny Lee Miller, and the 2020 movie with Anya Taylor-Joy, with the 2009 miniseries being my absolute favorite. Like, I could watch that any day of the year and just be happy. And it's interesting because obviously there are different levels of sort of faithfulness to the text. And 2009 is so faithful. There is so little that they cut out. But as always with Jane Austen, it is so wonderful and insightful to get that internal narration from the characters, and also of course the commentary from the narrator themselves. I think of all of the Austen books I've read so far, Highbury feels the most like a real place. Like, it has such a well-populated community, and I just get the sense of it and the way that it operates so well. Emma has a really fun group of characters, and reading it, you can really understand why the writer-director of Clueless immediately thought high school. Like, Clueless is a very faithful adaptation. It's actually so impressive. Some other lovely things I found about Emma in particular was this sense of intergender friendship and just like a lot of really casual respect for women from a bunch of the men. Friendships between men and women are just so normalized in Emma, to the point where like people are just stunned when people reveal that they are in love and or secretly engaged. It just goes against so much of sort of what we're told, or like what we perhaps assume about a period in history that was supposed to be so staunchly divided, men and women, and no unsupervised interaction between the two. Like, Emma is 21 years old. She gets into a cab alone with a man that several people have observed is definitely in love with her, and like, no one gives a fuck. Knightley and Mrs. Weston are casually just mates who hang out. Mr. Woodhouse, who is my favorite of all of the Austen dads, is constantly in the company of women. He seeks out the company of women as often as he can. He loves both of his daughters so much. It's just a great vibe. It is almost entirely built upon a series of misunderstandings. Emma is well-meaning, but also just like a huge fucking menace. And it's great. I had so much fun. I, perhaps somewhat notoriously, am really fond in particular of Jane Austen's most annoying characters. Like, I am a huge fan of Mr. Collins as a character and Mary Musgrove from Persuasion, and Emma gives me two incredibly amazing annoying characters in the lovely, sweet, very long-winded Miss Bates, and the only person more of a menace than Emma in Mrs. Elton. Yeah, I just had the best time, and I cannot wait to see what Austen book we are reading next month. We are down to just 3 more novels, and then I'll probably look into Sanditon and Lady Susan to finish it off. But voting is currently occurring in the Discord. I voted for Mansfield Park because I'm really intrigued / want to get it out of the way, but Sense and Sensibility is currently winning. Anyway, stay tuned. Emma is what I finished most recently, so basically that is how I have closed out March, and I'm really glad that I saved it till last, because now we move on to the Murderbot portion of this video, and I have mixed feelings, because I think reading 6 Murderbot books in 2.5 weeks was probably a mistake for me personally. So the first 4 novellas in the Murderbot Diaries are books that I've read before and that I have enjoyed enormously. This was my 3rd time reading them, and I think I enjoyed them even more reading them so close together, because this is the first time that I've read them back to back. If you are unfamiliar with Murderbot, it is a science fiction series following a construct, which is a part organic, part mechanical robot. In this case, it is a corporate made and owned security unit who has hacked its own governing module, which is just like the little safeguard that the corporation can use to control it. It has done this in response to being made to massacre a bunch of humans who were under its care, and it sort of continues to exist under corporate ownership, pretending to still be under control, but really just watching a lot of soap operas in the back of its head while it goes about its business. That all happens before page 1. The story starts on its last corporate contract, in which it is kind of forced to reveal its hacked nature to its clients and forms sort of a relationship and leads to its freedom, which it doesn't necessarily want per se. So the first 4 novellas are this really interesting arc in which Murderbot is making its way in the universe alone for the first time and making decisions and sort of trying to figure out how it feels about everything. And while it's doing this, it has to pretend to be human to blend in with all of the other free humans, and it poses as a security consultant. So every novella has like a solid little plot in which it's doing like a little mission, and then we get the emotional stuff alongside it. It makes friends and allies along the way. It's just a really great use of episodic serial storytelling, which is why it is a fantastic candidate for a TV adaptation, which is happening with Apple Plus. I think it's coming out this year or next year. I'm very excited to see it, and like very, very curious to see how they're going to approach it, because we know like nothing yet except for some of the cast, but I am intrigued / excited about the cast that we have seen so far. Alexander Skarsgård on the fence about, but I do like him in everything else I've ever seen him in, so he has a certain amount of my trust there. But there is controversy there, or like just a lot of mixed feelings from the fan base, because Murderbot is literally never described in the book. There is no sense of its gender, presentation, its skin color, it's anything. So a bunch of people are disappointed that it has been cast as a masculine presenting white guy. I think that's a fair way to feel. I don't share it personally, because in my head, Murderbot was Wes Chatham, who plays Amos in The Expanse, so I am the problem. But back to the books. I have read the first 4 novellas 3 times now, but this was my first time reading the 2 Murderbot novels, and these I struggled with, particularly the first one, Network Effect, more so than the second one, System Collapse. Now, I think it's always difficult, just for the reader, like knee-jerk reaction, when a book sort of changes its format. So going from a 100-page novella to a 300 and something page novel. So I don't know if that's why this book felt so bloated to me, or if it actually was just kind of spinning its wheels more than it needed to. Now, grain of salt, I think a combination of things were happening here for me emotionally and mentally. One being that I read this at the height of my sinus infection. So I was woozy as fuck and foggy and very, very in pain. I'm also bad at like binging book series, so I think a certain amount of fatigue with Murderbot was setting in. And also I started reading it via the audiobook, and while I enjoy Kevin R. Free's narration in general and haven't really had any complaints about any of the novellas up to this point, I really hated his voice for like all of the humans in this book. I thought everyone sounded so fucking whiny and just like even more sarcastic than they needed to. So the book felt too long and also really repetitive. I was in a bad mood and everyone was annoying the shit out of me. It did get better when I switched from the audiobook back to the hardcover, but also I didn't do that until about halfway through. And certainly at like the last quarter of the book is by far when the most interesting things are happening. So while I do think I need to read it again sometime completely on paper down the track to give it like a really fair assessment, I do think that I liked this book least of everything in the series, except for the 5th novella, Fugitive Telemetry, which was released post the first novel but is set chronologically before the novel. So I have read it after the 4th novella a couple times, because people always tell you to do that. They're like, read it chronologically and it'll flow way better. I think that book is pointless, and I think it's just fan service and wheel spinning, and it put me in a really bad mood. So I skipped it this time thinking that I would skip all of the bad feelings that it gave me. But no, I thought this novel had way too many fan servicey banter moments in it as well, which does make me worry that Murderbot just got too fucking popular and Martha Wells was just asked to write more than she had planned for or wanted to. And I did wonder if I should put off reading the next novel until I was feeling better about Murderbot again, but I really just kind of wanted to like put a cap on the series for now and just like catch up to everything that was released. So I forged ahead, and luckily, after a very brief moment of, oh fuck, they're still on this fucking planet, I did enjoy this one a lot more. It is half as long as Network Effect, which I think really helps. The first half of it is still a bit slow, but the pacing overall is just much tighter. I think plot and character and story are all much better balanced in System Collapse than they are in Network Effect, which is just gets so bogged down in a plot that I failed to care enormously about. But I do think it might work better on screen. but who knows when they will get up to that one. I don't know if they're doing like a season per novella or an episode per novella. Like, the scope can be as big or as small as they want it to be. Maybe it'll be like 2 novellas to a season. I think you could do 3. It depends on how long a season is. I don't know. We know literally nothing, but I am out of things to say about it. I am still a fan of Murderbot. I will read whatever inevitably comes next. I do think you could easily end the series after System Collapse. I don't think it will be ended because Murderbot sells really well and Martha Wells gets great award recognition for it, which is not a slight on Martha Wells or Tor or anyone publishing them. Get your bag, and people love this series. And I would have said that I loved Murderbot up until this month. I think with the new books factored in, I probably go down to just liking Murderbot, but I love it for everyone else. If that makes sense. I bear no ill will. That was March. It was a bit loopy. Thank you for joining me in this even more chaotic than usual monthly wrap up. If you're new, I would love for you to stick around. If you are old, I just love you in general. Here's to April being, I don't know, something. Oh, DNFs. After my very positive review of The Last Watch last month, in February, I DNF'd the sequel, the title of which I've already forgotten, but I'll put it here. Oh, it's behind my head. The Exiled Fleet by J.S. Hughes. I don't know if my mood changed or if this book was suffering a bit from second book syndrome. I believe it was meant to be a duology that has become, or that became a trilogy along the way. But I got 147 pages into this book, and most of those 147 pages were concerned with fixing the ship they were on. Like the ending of book 1 was very gung-ho, let's go do the thing. And then 146 pages of fixing the ship so that they could do the thing. And then they fix the ship. And then they have to fix the ship more. They have to go on a mission to fix the ship more than they already have. And I put the book down very forcefully. I think it's a soft DNF. I do want to go back to it and see what happens, but I couldn't handle more ship fixing. I also think the dialogue got less good. Everyone just got more annoying in this book. But given that that is my critique of a few books this month, I am wondering if I was just really annoyed because the second book I DNF'd was Wearing the Lion by John Wiswell, which was an advanced review copy. John Wiswell is the author of Someone You Can Build a Nest In, which I read last year and really enjoyed. That was kind of like a high fantasy personal stakes kind of cozy horror. It was a lot of genres in one, but it mostly worked well. I thought it was really different and new and really interesting and like surprisingly wholesome for a book that is honestly got so many like great little gross bits. The heroine of the piece is like the Thing from The Thing, except not really like a hive mind or anything. She's just like one person, but she is like an amorphous blob who eats people, but is also like a very pleasant asexual lesbian who falls in love with someone with like a really abusive family. Anyway, I like what John Wiswell is doing. I think he's a cool and interesting writer. It just didn't work for me as well in Wearing the Lion, which is a retelling of the mythology around Heracles, or Hercules as is his Roman name. If you have ever been wondering at the difference between Heracles and Hercules, it's just one is Roman, one is Greek. Yes, the Disney movie used the Roman name on the Greek myth. No one really cares that much, but like, it's just a fun fact for you. So Wearing the Lion is a fresh kind of comedic take on the story of Heracles, but also not, because it includes the incredibly dark things that happen in the story of Heracles, but like it puts a really positive spin on a bunch of them. I think this book is going to be really well received and well loved by so many people. It's funny, it's kind, it's inclusive. It just it just annoyed the shit out of me. I'm not remotely opposed to like funny takes on Greek mythology. I'm a fan of Natalie Haynes, who does it a lot. John Wiswell's sense of humor in this one just didn't quite like hit the mark for me. Like, it didn't gel with my sense of humor, which is like a risk you take in any form of funny media. I also found the POV relay really repetitive. It's made up of really short chapters that bounce between Hera and Heracles, and it was too choppy for me. But yeah, I think in this case, it's very much a it's not you, it's me situation. As far as the Greek mythology retelling aspect of it goes, Heracles is not remotely a character I have like any experience with. I haven't read any of his source texts or poems or whatever. I mean, translations of. I cannot read Greek, ancient or otherwise. But as far as I'm aware, I think the book is fairly faithful while making some really refreshing and interesting choices to riff on the original story. So as a retelling, I think it's probably quite interesting. But I will never know how it ends.